Okay, everybody. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome you to the kind of finale of Bronte 2020. And it's my absolute honour to introduce Sally Wainwright, who needs no introduction because Sally is known for so many of our best things. She's written for Corrie. She worked on The Archers. Her original dramas include At Home with the Braithwaites, Spark House, The Amazing Mrs. Pritchard, Jane Hall, Unforgiven, Last Tango in Halifax, Scott and Bailey, Happy Valley, love Happy Valley, of course To Walk Invisible and Gentleman Jack, and obviously that had an amazing success for the first season, and Sally's currently writing the second season. So before we get talking, let's have a little short clip of Sally's work.
It's wonderful. It's delightful.
I told all my mates at school and they think it's brilliant. Oh.
It's just so uplifting. It's just so extraordinary. Well, I suppose we're just lucky we came across each other again after so many years.
Yes. And it's all thanks to William.
And your Ralph.
Yeah, and our Ralph. I'll drink to that. They put our names on Facebook for us.
Oh, I know. Caroline told me all about it.
Oh, well, there you go then. Well, the rest is history.
It's beautiful.
Actions speak louder than words.
Okay. Can I just say this though, Liam? The light is making me nervous. You've had a lot to drink and you've got the shakes and you might press it without intending to, and I'd like to put it down.
Just leave me alone, you stupid bitch.
You're upset, I understand that. The point I'm making is that with all these fumes, and frankly, I don't know how you're staying conscious, you could go up any second whether you intend to or not. And once you go up, you won't just go up a bit, you'll go up a lot. And the other big thing to say is it hurts. 3 seconds in, you'll be screaming at me to put you out. 7 seconds in, you'll be begging me to shoot you.
9512.
I love you, Anne. I'm in love with you. I always have been. Don't hurt me. I'm not as strong as you think. Well, I am, obviously, but sometimes I'm not.
What's the matter? What's the matter?
Somebody has been in my room.
Somebody?
Somebody has been through my things and not had the wit when they put them back to realise that everything's in a certain order.
Well, who? We haven't. I haven't.
You haven't. You wouldn't. I know that. Branwell's in Halifax. It's safe to assume Papa couldn't see to do it. And anyway, why would he bother? Tabby's got better things to do, and Martha can't read that well. Yet she also has too much dignity and respect for other people's things.
I shouldn't have. I know. But I'm not sorry. I mean, I am sorry. Look, Emily, your poems are... they're extraordinary. I know they're private, I know they're personal, there are 1,001 things, but they're not something to keep hidden. I admit, it's curiosity, but not idle curiosity, I hope, but something more noble.
Noble? Going into people's bedrooms, going through people's things?
No woman, no one has ever written poetry like this. Nothing I've read, nothing I can think of, nothing published as its equal. Emily, they're exceptional, they're astonishing. I couldn't breathe when I was reading them. I know you're angry, and I know what I did is unforgivable, except please see that it isn't.
You disgust me. You can't begin to imagine how much. You stay out of my room, and you don't speak to me. You don't speak to me generally, and you don't speak to me specifically about your misguided, tedious, grubby little publishing plans.
Amazing. I love that slap that Chloe Curry does on Finn's head there. Is it a slap? I don't even know if to call it a slap if that's right. It's a kind of like a push. I don't know. It's amazing.
Well, we talked a lot about sibling sisterly feuding and how tawdry it is with those nearest and dearest to you when things like that go a bit wrong. And a lot of the conversations we had and the movement around the room played on the fact that Emily was so much taller than Charlotte, which we know she was in real life. I think Emily was 5'10" and Charlotte was 4'12".
There was a lot of height difference between them, yeah.
And we did consciously cast actors of that height because that's, one of the facts we know about them physically. Mm-hmm. And it came out of that kind of, we rehearsed that scene a lot. We had a week of rehearsal, which you don't often get in TV. So I spent the week, Chloe called it the Bronte boot camp, and that kind of took off, and they all called it the Bronte boot camp. But it meant we got a chance to rehearse really well, and that kind of physical proximity and that kind of physical familiarity between them as siblings was something that we talked a lot about, and that quite eccentric slap. It's not a slap and it's not a punch. It's
like a shove, isn't it, in some way?
And you're just so tiny. I can do that. So I thought it was lovely. I thought it was a fantastic piece of acting on Chloe's part. That she came up with that, and it was, it was real. There was something real about it.
Yeah. Poor Finn's face must have been really sore after that. I wanted to, start by talking, and we kind of saw in the clips there, so many fabulous northern female characters are central to your drama. It's, Gentleman Jack, To Walk Invisible, Happy Valley. What is it that draws you to that subject? Why do you keep returning to it?
I don't do it consciously, I just write about what interests me. And I guess I find women more interesting to write for. And I don't know if that's because I'm a woman and I've got a woman's brain. And so, I hope I do write well for men. There's this sort of misconception that it's okay for men to write for women, but women can't write for men.
Which is a load of nonsense, right?
Oh, yeah. Of course it is. But I think, I hope that, the characterisation of Branwell shows that that's not a problem. But I think women tend to be more emotionally articulate than men. So when, you're writing dialogue, you want it to feel real. Mm. So if you've got a man pouring his heart out, often that's, men just tend not to do it as much as women, I find. Some men do. You said, it's a bit of a generalisation, but on the whole, men, I think, sublimate their expression of emotional things in other ways, and women tend to want to talk about, what's up.
Yeah. I love how, sorry to interrupt you, in that scene from Happy Valley with Sarah Lancashire, she's kind of shouting, but she's not shouting, but she's really telling it as it is. And again, you get that expression, don't you?
That's a really interesting point, actually, because when I was developing Happy Valley, my police advisor was Lisa Farrand, who was a uniformed constable in West Yorkshire. She'd retired, but only just retired when she came on board as my advisor. And Lisa's not big. She's very she's physically very capable, but she's quite slightly built. And what was interesting about the way she talked about the job, and what I used in Catherine, and the way I constructed Catherine, and the way I had Catherine talk in scenes particularly like that one, what I realised is about women is that they policed with their personality rather than with the threat of brute force, which a big man can do. A big man, his simple presence will make a lot of people behave. Whereas a small woman has to have other tactics at her disposal, and Lisa is just very good at talking to people. She's very, very articulate and very never stuck for words in a crisis. And so I got that from her, and so that first scene was kind of dictated by getting to know Lisa really well and how she copes with situations and how she deals with things.
Yeah. And you've written, as we see from that montage, you've written stuff that's set both kind of in the contemporary moment, but also in the past, and you kind of move between them. What are the kind of different challenges for you when you do that? Are there challenges for you? And does that mean you approach those things very differently?
Yeah, I remember when I started writing To Walk Invisible, I wrote the scene breakdown quite quickly. I think I wrote the scene breakdown. I did a lot of reading. I'd been reading for a certain period of time, but when it actually came to sitting down and writing, I went to stay in Haworth for a week at Podden House at Bronte, with Steve Jansen, who's my advisor, and we spent a week there and wrote the scene breakdown. I wrote the storyline, wrote the scene breakdown, and then it got to the point where I had to start writing the dialogue, and I was really quite overwhelmed by having to write dialogue for Charlotte Bronte, you know, to make Charlotte Bronte speak.
Yeah.
It suddenly felt rather presumptuous.
Yeah.
But I had to get on with it. I was being paid to do it, so I thought I'd better start. And but it was hard because you want to serve these people well, and you want to be respectful of who they were, and that sort of thing. But at the same time, you know, it's wrong to be too in awe, because you've got to make them real people. And I think the challenge really is to remember that you're writing for a contemporary audience.
Yeah.
So you've got to write a version of a verbal language that your contemporary audience will accept is of the past, but that isn't alienating, that isn't too... you see, I think in this country we've developed a period drama speak.
Okay.
A language that we tend to use in period dramas, where everybody talks in sort of Miltonic inversions and and heightened. And I kind of doubt that people really did. I think they may have done in certain circumstances when they were, you know, trying to talk like Hyacinth Bouquet or something.
Yeah, the Brontes didn't, and neither did Anne Lister.
Yeah. I mean, it was a really interesting point actually when I watched it again this afternoon, because I hadn't seen it for a couple of years, and I thought I'd better watch it again so I knew what we were talking about. And I realised I'd used the word fuck 3 times.
Which people complained about, didn't they?
Yeah, I think Lynn Reid Banks wrote a letter to The Guardian, which I found hilarious, because, you know, she said very categorically, Branwell would not have said fuck. And it's like, well, how do you know to begin with?
Yeah.
And, you know, it's not like the word didn't exist.
Exactly. There was loads of slang, loads of foul language.
Jane Austen didn't use it in any of her novels. It didn't mean it wasn't out there. So I remember being in the parsonage library, actually, and I was with Steve. And I said to her, do you think Branwell would have said fuck? And she paused to think about it. And Anne Dinsdale was down the other end of the library. And she heard me whispering, and she said, of course he would. So, you know, and you know, those are the kind of interesting decisions you have to make about, you know, being aware that it probably will offend someone. Some people probably think the Brontes couldn't possibly have used bad language. I think it's unlikely, growing up where they did, that, and particularly Branwell, you know, he did enjoy the company of ordinary people.
Yeah.
And I think he would have heard that. He was in the boxing club in Haworth, I expect this. So, so that was the challenge. It was also the same challenge with Gentleman Jack, really, which I took a few more liberties with in terms of stylistically. It's a lot more modern. It's a lot more enjoying the fact that it is a contemporary audience watching it. You know, the way Anne speaks to camera, which I thought was a really appropriate device for someone who's chiefly known to us because she wrote diaries in which she does effectively speak straight to us. There's no middleman. You know, it's not through any. You know, it's not. It does feel like when you get into the swing of reading the journals, it does feel like you've got a hotline to Anne Lister, and she is right, speaking straight to you. So it did feel very appropriate to do that.
Am I right in saying, I mean, Gentleman Jack has been something you've been wanting to bring to the screen for a long time, and you've been kind of working on and developing, and it's brilliant that it's now there, and we're getting season 2, and we're all waiting for it eagerly. No pressure. With To Walk Invisible, how did that come about? What was your goal, or what was because it came out in the bicentenary, and you know, how did that come about for you?
I was approached by Faith Penhill,
Okay.
who it was the exec on it, and who also execs Gentleman Jack. She was at BBC Wales then, and she wanted to she wanted a biopic about the Brontes. I think that's how it started, and that was a good few years earlier. I think it was about 2010. And I was just very busy. I think Scott and Bailey had just really taken off then, and I never found time. I really wanted to do it. I've always been passionate about the Brontes, so I was really excited about doing it. But there never seemed to be a right time to do it. And then, of course, Charlotte, the bicentenary of Charlotte's birth, was approaching in 2016, and it felt like if I don't do it now, at such a opportune moment, it's probably never going to happen. So it was all a bit last minute. I mean, we only just got it into 2016, I think.
Oh, really?
Transmission. So it came from a conversation with Faith.
So you said you watched it earlier today. How do you feel looking back at it now?
Sorry, you just froze.
Oh, sorry. You said you watched To Walk Invisible earlier today. How did you feel looking back at it? Because it's 4 years now, isn't it? Yeah,
it was really interesting actually. I mean, it's really interesting watching things that you've directed yourself. Because I was very pleased with a lot of it, but then there were odd bits and pieces where I was thinking, I wish I'd got another shot there.
Could have written that line differently.
Just a few bits about. I always hated that wall in the backyard.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it always looked like plastic to me, which of course it was because we built that.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the set design was very good, but there were bits of it that were better than others. And it was a tough shoot. I never got enough shots, and although I didn't notice that too badly today, there were a couple of places where I think it really was unfortunate not to get a few more shots, but on the whole, what really blew me away was Adam's performance. I know it was extra. They were all wonderful. They worked so hard. Those 4 young adults, brilliant actors. They were just they really worked brilliantly together, and they really put their hearts and souls into it. And it was really uplifting being with them. They just cared so much about what they did.
Yeah. It was
fantastic. But yeah, the scene you mentioned earlier where Adam is crying and saying, "Stop looking at me."
Yeah.
He really threw himself into it in a way that was. I mean, his part was a lot more emotional in many ways than the sisters, just because of the nature of what he went through with his addictions. And it was just stunning, some of the things he did to get himself into character. Well, he disappeared at one point. The first assistant couldn't find him, and he was sort of hiding around the corner listening to his music, kind of. But I was just in awe of him. The fact that he could, as I often am with actors, that they can just produce this stuff in front of everybody.
Yeah.
Just tell them to,
Yeah.
It was extraordinary, that performance, and that's, I think, the biggest thing that struck me today was just how extraordinary he was. It was amazing.
Yeah, I think I said to you before that I've taught To Walk Invisible a couple of times, and there's never a dry eye in the room with the students, and they are blown away by Adam's performance. Not everybody's, but Adam's performance. That, as you say, the kind of that physicality that he brings to Bramwell and brings him alive in a way. And I guess it leads me on to a question about the way in which To Walk Invisible was acclaimed for its realism, showing both the whole family as real people, but showing them not as the Bronte, showing them as Charlotte, Emily and Anne, the women, and then showing, as we kind of talked about with Adam, the kind of reality of addiction and kind of mental health challenges. Can you say a little bit about what you were trying to do with both of those things in terms of how you were representing kind of the Brontes as real people and that kind of sensitive topic?
I guess for me it was about the story. It was about how Branwell clearly affected his sisters. I mean, they were. I remember somebody criticised the show for not being enough about the women, and I think what I was trying to do was to show that, you know, when they were children, they were a team of four. You know, they were this gang that split into two: Charlotte and Branwell and Emily and Anne, and that they were all kind of interdependent. Their worlds were their fantasy worlds were. You know, a construction that all four of them worked on. And Branwell was very much kind of the ringleader in the early days, Branwell and Charlotte. And I think that's why Charlotte was more disillusioned with him than anyone else, is because when they were young, it seems to me that they were like this dynamic duo of creativity, and she lost her writing partner. And so I completely understand why Charlotte was so angry and disillusioned with him. But it was really what I wanted to dramatise was how much he affected them for good and ill. You know, in the early days, it was creating this writer's workshop that was their front room, and his ambition as well to want to be a published writer, that clearly rubbed off on them as well. Then, as he started to develop problems, they were to live with an addict must be an awful place to be, and for them to live through that, it clearly affected their work. It's very clear in Tennant. It's very clear in Wuthering Heights. That this had a profound effect on them. What he was doing to them, the destructiveness of what he brought to their household. I kind of wanted to reflect that in the story of how they developed as writers and what they were influenced by.
Are there, when you've had people responding to you, said, people have criticised you for, the swearing, and too much Branwell, not enough of the siblings. That aside, though, are there kind of, when people, talk to you about To Walk Invisible, are there particular moments that they always bring up with you that stand out to them? We were talking obviously with Adam about the moment with him and Emily sat on the fence doing the wolf howl, which kind of is so poignant and kind of captures such a bond. But do people bring up particular moments with you, or is it just kind of generic comments that they make to you about the drama?
I can't think of anything that it's kind of a while now since it was on, so I can't really. I being who I am, I tend to remember the bad comments rather than the good.
It's only geeks like us that want to talk about all of the detail as well, isn't it?
I think the thing with the Brontes is people have very strong opinions about the Brontes, as you probably know.
Yeah.
To have very powerful opinions. So I decided that I couldn't worry about that too much. I was, I just wanted to do what I wanted to do. I wanted to show how I saw them. I can't answer that question. I can't remember anybody. It was interesting when I watched it this afternoon. What struck me, the scene that made me actually cry was when Charlotte and Anne go down to talk to.
Oh yeah.
And he suddenly realises, oh my God, she is a rebel.
Yeah.
He's been talking to her like she's a little northern woman.
Yeah. I remember people live tweeting about that scene as it broadcast. I think there was just like this proverbial fist punch when she delivers that kind of line about, is it my size kind of thing.
Lovely was Finn's performance, obviously, but then Luke Newby, who played the publisher, whose name what was it?
Newby.
Sorry?
Newby.
No, the publisher. Was that Luke Newby, the actor?
Sorry, we've got someone else.
George Smith.
Oh, George Smith. That's it.
Yeah.
It was that look in his eye when the penny drops that this really is her. I thought that was, and I did a really tight close up on him, on her, and a very tight close up on him as on both of them. Sorry, and it was. I think that was one of my favourite bits of
Mm. You talked a little bit about the set earlier, and you weren't happy with the wall. You said you thought it looked plastic.
Yeah.
I guess for viewers though, looking at the set, it's incredible because we see the parsonage as it kind of
amazing. I mean, it's an amazing achievement. I mean, we obviously talked about that at length because it was a very expensive thing to do, but the parsonage would have looked so different then. Obviously, to what it looks like now, where, you know, we're all very familiar with the parsonage as it is now, with all those trees in the graveyard, and of course they weren't there then.
Yeah.
We know those were planted, I think, in the 1860s.
Yeah.
So it would have looked a lot more barren and bleak, which is what we did achieve, and it would have felt like a lot more on the edge of the village, whereas now it's almost the centre of the village because that's where everybody's going.
Yeah. And we had Anne Dinsdale was talking earlier. She said that it was a really uncanny experience for her walking onto the set.
Oh yeah.
You know, obviously reading and writing about the kind of Brontes for so long, and then here it is alive. Did you take artistic license with aspects of that to bring it to life?
No, I mean our thing was to try and recreate it as accurately as we could.
Mm-hmm.
There was a bit of an anomaly with the height, in that there were some steps down the side from the front to the back which aren't there in real life.
Mm-hmm.
The way it was built, but I don't think anybody noticed that except me. No, the idea was to try and recreate it as exactly as we could based on what we knew about what the parsonage was like.
Yeah.
Then, before the wing was built on the side.
Yeah.
And when it was all different around the back, because we did. I think Grant found some ground plans from what it was like in the 1840s.
Yeah.
So we knew what the house. I think we got a really accurate idea of what the house looked like at the back. Which is, of course, is all the shop now. So yeah. Sorry, I can't remember what you're.
No. We were just. I was just asked about what bits of artistic license you took with the set, which you kind of indicated some of that, and obviously the difference of kind of making it visibly different to represent that it was very different back in its day. You get the sense of that real isolation on top of a hill that. But today it's a bustling town, isn't it? And it kind of doesn't you have to move your imagination to understand what it would have been.
One of the things we tried to do as well was suggest that it probably wasn't a very healthy environment. You know, that house probably was riddled with damp.
Yeah.
I think when Charlotte became rich and famous, she had things like wallpaper on the walls.
Yeah.
It would have become when you go in there now, it's lovely. They keep it so beautifully and it looks so inviting, and it's like you kind of wish you lived there yourself. But I think when the Brontes were there, it would have been very, very much bleaker.
Yeah, I always imagined that there would have been.
You've frozen again, Claire.
Oh, you've frozen as well. Oh no, you're back. There you go. You're back as well. Sorry. I was going to say I always imagined that the acoustics in that house must have been really odd. Been on top of that hill and having that wind going around it. Those windows were thin. It must have been. You could have heard it howling, I imagine. Which obviously kind of they talk about in their writing, the kind of power of the wind. Sorry, I think people are turning their videos on and off. So do you mind not momentarily? If I could ask you mentioned, Sally, the ending of To Walk Invisible ended in the parsonage, and the whole kind of, it ends with present day walking through the shop and the courtyard ending with that statue. And I wanted to ask you two things about the ending. One, can you tell us a little bit about that ending and what you were kind of, I guess, doing with that? And two, in the original script, which is on the BBC website, the ending talks about ending originally with a shot of Bramwell. That there's a statue of Bramwell down by the canal in Hebden Bridge, I think. Yeah. And you were going to end there, but then that doesn't appear in the final cut of To Walk Invisible. So could you tell us about why that ending wasn't wasn't in the original script, and why you went with that kind of parsonage shot in the end.
Yeah, it was unfortunate actually, because I think that would have been a better ending in some ways. So I think it's actually nearer Sorby Bridge than Hebden Bridge.
Oh yeah, Sorby Bridge. Sorry, you're absolutely right.
I used to work in Sorby Bridge at the moment. And I came across this because I used to walk along the canal a lot, and so there used to be this wooden carved statue of it was kind of tribute to Branwell, I think. And I wanted to end with that, and it's in a funny little dank entrance. And when I went there, it was always covered. There was just like beer bottles and beer cans chucked around, like that's where people went to have a drink and a smoke, you know, which felt kind of quite appropriate for Branwell.
Yeah.
But then when I went back to find it for this, it had just deteriorated really badly, and we decided it was unfilmable, and that if we'd shot it, people wouldn't really know what they were looking at.
Yeah.
Just decayed really badly. I think his hand had fallen off. I think half his face was missing.
Yeah.
So we decided it wasn't going to work. So we came up with the new ending, which was about showing that these three women who spent most of their lives in obscurity, you know, this is now a mecca for people who appreciate their work, for people from all over the world. It was showing how this same house is now this, you know, very vibrant place where people come to learn more about the Brontes. So it was, it was meant to be a celebration of how much we appreciate them now and how well loved they are now. Yeah,
which comes across, absolutely comes across. And last year, Sarah and I think I was saying to you, Sarah and I went looking for the Branwell statue. And, you know, did all our research and went walking down the canal and discovered it had been burnt down. It's no longer there. So, yeah, it's not even a landmark. It's not even acknowledged. Like you say, it's already deteriorating and now it's just blank, which is kind of really almost metaphorical, really, for some of the complexities of Branwell's life.
It's a shame because I don't know if you've seen any photos of it from when it was originally put there.
Like a totem pole almost, isn't it?
Yeah, it was a really interesting piece of work. It just needed, you know, it's just very dank down there. The climate just obviously wasn't very conducive to its existence.
Yeah, absolutely. That brings me to the end of my questions. Sally, are you happy to answer the questions? I've had loads of messages I could see coming up on my screen from people who want me to ask things of you, if that's okay. So Erica says she absolutely loved To Walk Invisible. It was incredibly moving to watch the Brontes so realistically. What did you feel the first time you saw the actors with their costumes on in the reconstitution of the parsonage?
It's always a big moment when that happens. You know, it's very, you know, you are trying to recreate reality, and it's always quite an emotional thing when you when they first appear, and you know, we had the set looked fantastic, and then the costumes, which were designed by Tom Pye, who also does the costumes for Gentleman Jack. Just had such detail and again verisimilitude. You just absolutely believe this is what it was like. It's quite an emotional experience.
Yeah,
and you don't get used to it. It's like an everyday. You're thinking, oh my God, we're really doing this. It's amazing. I think that's why I write dramas. Why I like certainly, you know, I am a bit of a amateur historian. I do love history, and to bring people like the Bronte sisters and Anne Lister to life, it is a real kick, you know. And there was a panel earlier of contemporary women writers talking about exactly that, the reasons that they write, you know, contemporary historical stuff and the kind of power and how it can speak to a whole range of contemporary issues as well. It's fun, and it makes the past relatable to people in lots of ways. And it's the closest we're going to get to travelling back in time.
Yeah, absolutely. Following on from that point, actually, and staying with the question about the set, Jane said, "What happened to the rest of the amazing fake parsonage set? I know Branwell's room is in the parsonage, but does it still exist? Sorry, can we ever visit an exhibition of the rest of it?" I might have heard a rumour. Is it in someone's garage, or is that a complete myth and a lie?
I don't actually know where the set is. I don't know if it was kept or if it was destroyed. I mean, often these things are just destroyed afterwards.
Because it's MDF basically at the end of the day, isn't it? It's
yeah, and
I don't mean that derogatory, obviously.
I know, if it was an ongoing series, you'd store it and use it next year. But I think when clearly this was a single drama, so it was probably destroyed. I know by the time we finished filming, the exterior build of the parsonage was already falling apart.
Oh wow!
I mean, it was really exposed to the elements up there. It was on a car park up above Haworth.
Yeah. And
obviously they started filming it well before we started. They started building it well before we started filming.
Yeah.
So it had been up quite a long time, and in the last few days of filming, it was really starting to show signs of it wasn't going to last much longer.
A bit like the Bramwell statue, then, in some ways. Leslie is obviously a fan because she says that she heard you speaking at Ilkley Festival, where you said you plan to do an adaptation of Tennant. Has this been scrapped?
It's not been scrapped. I would say it's been put on a bit of a shelf. I started working on it, and I kind of got overtaken by events, really. And I found I kind of ran into problems with Helen Graham. I started to find it quite difficult to make her sympathetic. Not that I necessarily wanted to be sympathetic, but sympathetic enough to me to bother to dramatise her.
Mm-hmm.
I started to get a bit fed up of her.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to be a little bit in love with your characters to, for the duration of, and the things you go through when you write, you've really got to be on their side. And I really struggled sometimes to be on her side. Their world was very different to ours. It's very difficult, I think, to write something where a modern audience is going to empathise with someone behaving in the way they do because of their religious beliefs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
In our society, broadly speaking, if you're going to behave in a certain way because of your religious beliefs, you're going to lose a lot of sympathy with a modern audience.
And am I right in saying, because obviously Saran Jones has been a lead in quite a few of your dramas, that there are some characters you've written and she's in mind almost? Is that something that also plays into writing with Helen, that you kind of need or needed, or maybe that there's not a strong visual, because she's quite passive at times and then goes quite a transformation in the novel. Is that something that factors in, that you need to have a kind of the performance element in mind when you're writing a character?
Yeah, I mean, I when I started working on it, I thought there were any number of fantastic actresses who could have taken Helen Graham on. That wasn't the issue.
Okay.
Really. More intrinsic to her. Sort of, I mean, she's very interesting. Sorry, don't misunderstand me. I do find her interesting, but then a lot of it revolves so much around religion that's where I parted company with it in terms of how I could make it click with a modern audience.
Yeah.
When you first meet her and the first few encounters with her, she comes across as a really intriguing character, but it was when she goes back to help Arthur Huntingdon, I just kind of and the fact that she marries him in the first place, and
yeah,
and of course that comes in the middle of the book when you get the detail about that.
Yeah.
That's what I think where I started to get a bit worried about why she couldn't see. I think sorry, I'm remembering it now. It's when she starts to detail the progression of their relationship.
Yeah.
And she gets so many chances not to marry him because her aunt can see through.
And her aunt, right? Yeah, her aunt saying, "Don't do this. What are you doing?" And she's just ignoring it.
And I think that's where I kind of started to worry about her. And then again the religious thing.
Yeah. Well, speaking with Anne's work, it's obviously Anne's bicentenary, and Millie says, I was so fascinated by Anne and how her reputation was formed and manipulated by others after her death. In terms of Anne's characterisation in To Walk Invisible, how much did you draw from Charlotte's accounts, particularly her preface, or other impressions of Anne in constructing your version of Anne?
I tried to ignore all that crap Charlotte wrote about Anne after I think that's, I think that's the worst thing Charlotte did, was, try to stop the republication of Tennant and Wuthering Heights, and to try and perpetuate this myth of Anne being the baby of the family. She clearly was not the baby of the family. She was the one who could actually hold down a job for more than 5 minutes.
Yeah.
She's the one who really engaged with the world in a way that Emily clearly couldn't and didn't want to. And that Charlotte, really struggled with other people a lot of the time. So I was quite keen to show that Anne was, very much a powerful character in her own right, and at least a person in her own right. I think when she stands up to Emily, when she says, "No, I am going to go to London," and Emily says, "No, you're not going either." And makes it clear that she is. I think she was. It's tricky because I think Charlotte clearly was, extraordinarily talented, and Emily was too, and in a very different way. And Anne does tend to kind of get overlooked, but I think it's true that if you could remove Emily and Charlotte from the picture, which of course you can't, Anne would still now be published in her own right for Tennant and
Yeah. I think particularly if anyone reads her own kind of preface to the Tenant of Wildfell Hall, it's such a powerful rebuttal, really, to anything that Charlotte's kind of ever suggests about her. It's a really forceful kind of character, a woman with agency who knows her own mind, which comes across. Following on from that, we have a question from Ebony, who says, one thing I really loved about Walk Invisible was the way that anger and violence was present throughout the film, not just in the arguments with Branwell, but in Charlotte's rage and Patrick's snapping, a theme that also takes place in their books. Could you talk more about the decision of keeping those themes of anger in the film in a family setting and your kind of approach to that?
Well, again, I think there's a lot of anger and violence in the novels. I mean, you can't get much angrier than Wuthering Heights, can you? The anger and vitriol and nastiness in that book is gobsmacking. It's like, where did that come from?
We had, I think one of our first presenters this morning did a paper on Wuthering Heights. They were counting up the use of the term hate in it, and it's like ridiculous number of times. There's so much hate going on.
So I think their house was full of energy, mental energy, and it's kind of how I see them is that they must have, there's children play fighting and that kind of thing, and you grow up in that environment, and they were very dependent on one another, and I suppose they were dependent on one another because they couldn't find other kids who were anywhere near as brainy as they were. But they had, they must have had the most fantastic writers' room in the world, but it must have been quite a lively place, and I think a lot of drama is about conflict, and they would have known that intuitively, and the kind of stuff they were reading. And Patrick allowed them to read anything. He allowed them to read things that girls at that time probably generally weren't allowed to read. I think he let them read things like Byron, that was probably off the cards for most other people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think, and I don't know how much they would have been aware in the village in Haworth. It was probably quite a very down to earth, brusque place to grow up. And I know that we have this idea that they were sheltered, but the way Emily writes dialogue in Wuthering Heights is so accurate. Why wouldn't it be? She grew up there. Why wouldn't she? why would she have spoken anything other than what she was hearing? Why would she have written about any other kind of language than what she was hearing? But, you know, she must have heard it. There must have been, you know, gone out there. It made me laugh. It was hilarious. I rewatched the 1974 version.
Oh, yeah.
Francis and Howard. And they all talk like that.
I know, and that's a plastic set if ever there was one. It's really visible, isn't it?
London accents. They had these accents, and it made me angry. Apart from anything else, it's like, oh, they're writers and poets, therefore they can't possibly be from the north.
Yeah, there's a real delicacy to how they're presented as well. They're kind of, like you said, it's very kind of received pronunciation, and they're all moving very gently. There's no realism, which is what you then brought to that Bronte world, thankfully.
Like where they're sort of laughing at Tabby because she's a bit rural.
Yeah.
Charlotte was saying something about she'd boiled the potatoes down for vegetable glue.
Did you watch other biopics of the Brontes? I'm thinking of something like Devotion, which is just a real load of hokum from the 1940s. Have you seen that?
Oh no, I know the one you mean. I think I haven't watched that. I remember talking about it with Steve.
Yeah.
And I saw some stills from it, and I just realised it wasn't going to do me any good.
Oh, you'll save that for a day when you really have some vitriol in your life, and you'll love that one. They make Keeper, Emily's dog. You know, there's that great big dog. They make him like the Dulux dog. He's like a English sheepdog, and he's all blow dried, and it's just not. It's not that dog. You know, it's so yeah, completely sanitised in lots of ways. Someone called Lucy Snow says, Sally, you seem to have a really deep understanding of the Brontes in a way that's unique in the film world. I love and rewatch To Walk Invisible. Do you think you might revisit them in your future work?
Well, I was thinking this afternoon when I was watching it, how you could write a whole other drama about what happened to Charlotte when she was left alone.
Mm-hmm.
Or rather, when she was left with Patrick and Mr. Nicholson, and when she did become famous, and how she responded to fame.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know. I think that maybe somebody else should do that.
No, it needs to be you, Sally. There's no two ways about it. We've come to the end. There are loads more questions because we could keep you here all night and geek out about the Brontes with you. Sally, thank you so much for giving your time to us to come and talk to us about To Walk Invisible, and for your generosity and all the responses you've given us. Can I get
lockdown hair? I can't do anything about this. It's just gone crazy.
Don't worry, we all understand. We've all had the lockdown hair. Don't worry at all. Can I get everyone? Can you all unmute and give Sally a massive clap for being brilliant? Sally. Brilliant. With requests. So yeah, I guess it just leaves us to say goodbye and thank you, everybody.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
Yeah, bye everybody. Thank you. We hope to see you all soon.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thank you. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. For your hard work. It's been fantastic.
Yay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good job, Claire and Sarah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh.
It's been fantastic.
Brilliant. Glad you enjoyed it.
We did.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic.
Oh, that's really good.